Okay.
Hello and welcome to the War Report, the number one supporters of new Acting Secretary of Defense, Richard Spencer. But with that out of the way, I'm sorry, I just have to mention at the top of the show the fact that our Acting Secretary of Defense is the same name as this guy who's, an online figure. And it's like, honestly, at this point, I would take the Richard
Wait.
Spencer.
It's a different Richard Spencer?
Yeah, I was surprised
I
too when
thought
I
we
found.
got in.
Yeah, I thought we got into it. I thought entryism finally worked. I thought we finally climbed our way up to the top. But honestly, at this point, like, could that Richard Spencer be any worse than any of these people in Washington? But with that out of the way, we're gonna get into the news of the week. Unfortunately, Perseus could not join us. He's I'm gonna let you speculate. Well, leave it to your imagination. But we have some news about Iran. So, Foreign Minister Javid Zarif in his stats to the UN with the new U.S. sanction on Iran. So Trump has placed severe restrictions on Iran's foreign diplomat in his travels to meeting with the UN, despite calling for negotiations with Iran. Now, despite the ratcheted up military tensions between the U.S. and Iran, Zarif told NBC on Monday that we're, quote, not close to a military war. And Zarif stressed that sanctions are the biggest detriment to negotiations as they're targeting ordinary citizens in Iran. Now, he continued by denying that the Iranians were pursuing a nuclear weapon in their interview, stating, quote, if we wanted to develop a nuclear weapon, we would have been able to a long time ago. I mean, which is true. I mean, look how fast North Korea developed one. India and Pakistan were able to develop nuclear weapons in just a few years' time. So, if the Iranians wanted to, they would have it by now. We've
Yeah.
gone over this a million times over. Now, Zarif is currently in New York under a restricted area that only permits him to walk within a 6 block radius, allowing him only to travel between UN headquarters and where he's staying at. The UN stated that it is concerned by the move of the Trump administration and that deliberately impedes any negotiation process, which, where's the lie?
Yeah. Yeah. There's also Iran is also, of course, urging that talks resume over the J. What is it? The JOP,
The JCPOA, which whatever, which goes the
the
Iran deal.
JCPOA. Yeah. Not that much has changed since last week regarding Iran, but Iran seems to be dealing with it fairly well. Of course, there's other things to talk about, with regards of various Kurdish forces on the border with Iran and in Iraq. But yeah, that's all I have to say so far about these negotiations, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like just more along the lines of the schizophrenic policy where it's like, one day we're gonna let you, we want to negotiate with you. The next day we're only allowing you to walk 6 blocks in between where you're doing your job in the invitation of
Yeah.
our country, where we host an international organization. Which, yeah, look, as my negative feelings are about the UN, if we're gonna have it, at least do it properly. But that's all aside the point. Now, going back to the JCPOA. Iran expects the European partners to take steps towards implementing the end of their deal in opposition to Trump. Now, we may see more of this as the election gets closer and European leaders have less confidence that Trump will be reelected, so that they're getting ahead of potential oil deals to make with Iran once their replacement comes in. This is what Europe is hoping for. So, as you can see, like, Europe will probably be stumping for whichever Democratic opponent, whether that be 79-year-old Joe Biden or our neoliberal diversity queen Kamala Harris, which I look. I have my thoughts. I've covered the election several times over. But point being is, most Democrats, for better or for worse, are open to either some renegotiation of the Iran deal or completely rejoining back into the 2015 deal. So now, continuing on from that,
Right. And
go ahead.
but it's yeah, I mean, it's also interesting. Didn't the House pass the Defense Authorization Act? It's supposed to go to the Senate. They won that pretty handedly. I think like 220 versus 197.
Yeah, and there were several
So
Republicans who defected, pretty much saying that this does not
yeah.
give you permission to go to the war with Iran. If you want war with Iran, you need to go through a proper channel. You need to get a proper declaration of war, a proper authorization of military force, and that's not covered under the Afghanistan one, the Iraq one, or any of these other ones that we currently have in effect.
Holy smokes, that's gonna like really increase the kind of false flag that'll have to be created. It's gonna have to be really, really good.
Yeah, like and nothing in which we've seen in quite some time. Like we'll have to go back to like
Yeah,
very first Syria false flag, where where it's a complete deadlock at the UN. But as
yeah.
U.S.-Russian relations have only gotten worse, I can only imagine how that would play out. But going on from that, the EU foreign policy chief stated that Iran's recent violations of the defunct deal were, quote, not significant to the Europeans as it was to Trump. Now, no surprise here. Israel responded to the steps taken by Europe with a statement by Netanyahu comparing the move to Europe appeasing Nazi Germany before World War II. I can only imagine him and his voice, like getting in front of his teleprompter in English, like the video he puts on Twitter. Oh, Americans, these Europeans, they're like, no, not Angela Merkel. She's just like Adolf Hitler. But yeah, no surprise there. Of course, we've this is something we've also discussed in depth. The divergence between Europe in general, not just like the establishment in Europe, but even some of the more populace in Europe, despite rhetoric, despite everything on the surface, are drifting away from Israel because there's just not that same cultural religious appeal. Of course, they can pull in the United States, nor is there as much influence as they wield, or just the fact that it's way less significant to your average European than it is to your average American, or even going back to American strategy versus European strategy. Now, I've previously discounted the Eastern Mediterranean as strategically insignificant. Now, that's from an American first perspective. But if you want to go with this whole neoliberal world order, world domination perspective, yeah, the Eastern Mediterranean is significant. So, of course, they want Israel there. But point being is, no surprise, of course, Netanyahu is trying to use the boogeyman of Nazism because what else would he do in order to browbeat Europeans into cooperating with him?
Right. Although I wonder how many people even take it seriously that Iran is literally like the Nazi regime.
Well, I mean, what I think it was Lindsey Graham when the Iran deal was first being negotiated, saying Obama was opening the oven doors.
Oh,
If you remember
oh
that
my
one,
God, that's like 2016 irony level. Yeah, I mean, he's saying the magic words. He knows no one believes it. It's literally just a an attempt to have everyone behave.
yeah,
Like you better vote the right way. You go ahead.
it's honestly just for the sake of formality at this point. Like everyone expects him to say it, so he's got to say it.
Yes.
But
Yeah, that's right. Can you imagine a speech where he doesn't say it?
he didn't invoke the Nazis, huh? Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would start getting concerned that he was going to take some major action if he did not invoke the Nazis. I mean, because think of that. From that he's probably implying Israel's going to take its own action, knowing his unhinged approach to things. Yeah, Tehran might be a pile of ash by tomorrow morning if that's the case.
Yeah.
As much as the
Yeah.
neoconservatives would love him to lob a nuke there, but that's beside the point.
It's an incredible obsession, this idea that you're going to turn Iran back to the days of the Shah, right? In many regards, you could even see that Saudi Arabia would probably not be happy about that, right? Because they would obviously be competing for help and geopolitical strategies that they have in mind from the states, right? Um, they could become fearful that Israel could be, because it's right on the border, there to keep Saudi Arabia in check, and America would have a great relationship with Iran. You know, there's only so much, like, of the two countries, Saudi Arabia and Iran. Obviously, the breaking point for Saudi Arabia comes much sooner than it does for Israel, um, in terms of, like, how much does a friendly regime towards America benefit Saudi Arabia
Yeah,
with
yeah,
respect
I
to
would definitely
Israel?
agree. And going back to um, Iran under the Shah, in terms of if Iran were to start playing ball and being a good puppet regime in the United States, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if anyone else in our audience have noticed, but gas has gone up quite significantly. Without the boogeyman, the threat of the
Yes, it
Iranian
has.
menace, is what excuses do the Saudis have? I mean, look, you could say like OPEC in general, but let's be honest about who controls OPEC. But yeah, what excuse would they have not to pump up gas prices? Like, oh, things are stable. We can't drive up the barrel, oil per barrel price. So in a way, it is ironic how Iran existing benefits Saudi Arabia so long as like they don't go too crazy in the Strait of Hormuz, which we'll get into with a
Right.
bit of the tanker exchange, mainly between the UK and, of course, the Iranians. So on Ayatollah Khamenei's 80th birthday, he announced that Iran should take measures to pursue punishing the UK for taking the Iranian tanker. Now, the British stated that it would release the vessels under certain quote guarantees, which the Iranians have rejected. Now, in response to the Ayatollah's threats, the UK announced that they were sending a third warship to the Persian Gulf off to guard tankers from the IRGC. Now, despite Iran failing to seize the tanker, it shows how expensive it can get and having foreign countries have to navigate the Persian Gulf while their heads of state refuse to make a reasonable deal with Iran. Now, this will undoubtedly increase oil and gas prices in the coming future, as we were just discussing.
Yeah, it's sort of on the lines of what we were discussing last week about how a lot of these countries, first of all, they don't have as much, or they've lost far more in these ongoing struggles, and but in a way, that's left them more flexible because they've adapted to some of these conditions. Whereas, a massive hike in gas prices will disturb, for instance, the Western public, the American public, far more. They'll want a resolution. And the truth is, right now, America is really not capable of a resolution with Iran.
Yeah, barring certain elements. Not that I'm saying it would be peach without John Bolton there or Mike
Yeah,
Pompeo, but point being is, it things have been complicated because I know we diverge a bit on this. Now, I don't think the original JCPOA was this horrible things that most Republicans did. I thought it was a bit lackluster. I think we probably could have hardballed them for a little bit more out of it. And I think we probably could have gotten away with freezing less funds. I think we had way more leverage over Iran that we did not use when negotiating the initial deal. Point being is, the deal was done. It was over. It had been signed. And well, my attitude was about it last year when we pulled out. It's like, oh, the damage is done. What's happened has happened, and you won't see any improvement by getting out of this unless you want to take an extreme hardline stance against the Iranians, which we haven't really seen for the past few months. Now, you actually predicted back last summer that when the sanctions kicked in November, that's when we would see what we're actually seeing now. But well, you were about
right.
6 months off with your prediction, but still pretty close, I would say. But point being is, we've you have, of course, to borrow your term for the 17th time the show, the schizophrenic policy, not only within Trump's administration, but Trump himself. I want to make a deal with Iran. I'm going to be so tough on Iran. Of course, we could reference the all caps tweet from last year. One of my favorites. To Iranian President Rouhani, never ever threaten the United States again. That one right there.
It's literally like that bit in the old Simpsons. There was a Simpsons episode where the camera pans out and it's just the house, and Lisa says, "Dad, sit down." And it was like, they were watching some MacGyver thing. That Trump literally reminded me of one of those moments. Don, sit down.
Yeah. The '90s reality TV star president. No surprise that I mean, for better or for worse. Again, going back to we get those moments, and I honestly just laughed that one off. You can
Yeah,
go back and watch that old episode. But moving
yeah.
on from that, we
I
can
mean, I
get.
still love him.
Yeah. It's like at the very least he has caused enough chaos in order to at least buy, I quote unquote our side sometime, buy us some clout. Point being is, despite all the damage he's done, he's still gotten those key things in, especially with his recent comments. I'll take this moment for the tangent about, if they're going to complain so much, they should go back to their country. Now, yeah, of course, he was referring to the new Democratic Diversity Women's Coalition, which includes, of course, the Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. The Palestinian Tlaib, Rashida Tlaib, of course the Somali one, Ilhan Omar. Now, what's funny is he had an initial point. His rant was great about that. Not to get off on too much of a tangent, saying, "Look, they come here, they complain, they want to fundamentally transform society." He's If you read past the boomerism, he's making a good point about how we're at the point of the late stage empire where we start to invite in the foreign class and allow them to start ruling the people who used to rule the empire.
That's right.
But then,
Yeah.
he went
Go
full
ahead.
boomer talking about how they didn't respect Israel enough, which, in a strange way, he was attacking them for not upholding American values. Now, American values being very loosely applied in this sense, but point being is, in terms of that speech, like a lot of conservatives, of course, a lot of the conservative things, oh, Trump's racist, Trump's a xenophobe, but he made honestly points we've been making for years. It's like you're going to get to the point where the minority is governing the majority in the crumbling, decrepit, decadent empire.
Yeah. Yeah, and frankly, a lot of people are past the point of caring, and I think he knows that. I think Trump is already on his reelection campaign. He's using topical, everyday news, and he's using rhetoric that I think he's fully aware that will help him get reelected. Because even if he can't accomplish too much, the sentiments are mirrored, right?
Yeah, he's still a figurehead for the frustration of the American people. And seeing as the
Yes.
Democrats probably won't get their parallel populist candidate, I mean, think what you will about people like Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard or whatever. Look, they have some positions that are just frankly terrible, but they still get to the underlying issue of people's discontent with modern American society, modern American politics. And point being, just looking at the Democratic field, they're likely going to nominate someone like a Joe Biden, like a Kamala Harris, somebody who is a continuation of the empire, somebody who is an ideal imperial figurehead. Whereas you have Trump, as you say,
Right.
has crossed several boundaries, gone past several things, several heresies, as you've put it. This might as well be called the
Yes.
GSP show now, with all the references I'm making here. But that's beside the point. So even if Trump does do this pussyfoot neoconservatism, which is what I would call it, he's still saying the right things. He's still doing the right things. Rhetorically, he's still a perfect fit.
Yes, yes, he's still the perfect chaos candidate and the perfect candidate for Putin. I can't help
Yeah. Oh boy.
it. Yeah, I can't help saying that, especially because Camilla Harris was accusing the Colin Kaepernick stuff was planted and organized by Russia. Like,
Yeah. Oh,
what?
Russian bots. Like, I complain about Trump's hawkishness on Russia, but can you imagine what one of these like woke candidates would do? Well, we're gonna stand up to the racist, sexist, patriarchal Russians. We're gonna put those missile systems in Romania and send pride parades along with them to greet the new THAAD systems going into Bucharest and Budapest and Warsaw and Vilnius and Tallinn, and I'm running out of Eastern European capitals to list off.
Riga.
Riga,
That's right. We're
Kiev.
gonna make it safe. Yeah, it's I mean, and Eastern European countries are not enthusiastic about this. Like, it's seriously, they don't want a war over gay rights.
Yeah, like just going back.
It's not it's not worth it for them.
I mentioned this before the show just to get into a bit of the more cultural side of geopolitics, the more like, do we really want to side with the liberal empire? Poland recently declared itself LGBTQ free, and like a coalition of mayor of 30 major cities, they all got together with government officials and said, "Oh, we're free of the LGBTQ ideology that's trying to subvert our traditional values." And you know what? I don't think it's entirely true. They're definitely better than most Western nations on that note, but good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, it's their own little victory. We've been talking about this for a while. That Eastern Europe is going to dictate basically going forward for the next decade, just on what terms they're going to be willing to cooperate, both with NATO and the EU and with America in particular, right?
Hell, I'd say even
Because
with the Russians at
that's
this
how,
point.
yeah, Absolutely, absolutely. So um, they're setting the terms about how this is going to work out. In a sense, by them rejecting, the LGBTQ program that seems like an absolute necessity just to be in the EU and NATO, as a way for them to leverage their power, right? And they're very confident about doing that. And so, in a way, they're figuring out what their worth is to the West. They're dictating just on like how successful the West can expect to be as Poland and other Eastern European countries are in the Western sphere. So it's amazing that they're doing that, and on a very small level, it's not all that different than what Turkey is doing with the S-400.
Yeah, it's almost like like that's take collective action. Like the Poles and the Hungarians have to get with the Italians and the even to this point the Romanians are starting to get on it. Where if they act as this collective Southern Eastern European bloc, they have immense sway over both Brussels, Moscow, and Washington, and hell, maybe in 10 years, Beijing. I, it's to borrow an old cliche, all roads go back to Rome because you see, I know you could like point to the figures like Hungary with like Orban. Like I'm not going to deny that he's played a great role, but you're seeing, especially out of this block of countries, Italy's really taking prominence as we'll get into later in the show, but with a more I would say ridiculous story. But point being,
Yeah, yeah. Russia's Russia's importance to the West will only increase in time, in very very big ways. Everything from the One Belt One Road initiative to what 2017 was the first time a boat went across the north, the Arctic Ocean passage in Russia without an icebreaker. This is huge, right? Uh, Putin has already asked to quadruple the amount of goods being shipped back and forth. So this is so in this way. The Visegrad Group, for instance, uh, has even more clout, even more sway with regards to, say, being a buffer against Russia, like including Sweden in that regard too, as well as the Baltic countries, right? They can play the whole Russia phobia thing. They're going to invade any moment now, and that can give them some sweet deals. But as soon as the West goes into a certain direction, um, they can say, we're not interested, or they can test the waters by what Poland just did.
no,
So that's all I
absolutely.
have to say.
They put themselves in the bargaining position where they are the go between in between the West and Russia. So I mean, and also them looking at Ukraine, they see the consequences of choosing, ironically enough, both entirely Western and entirely Russian.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But moving on from that little bit of a tangent, I want to get into a bit of Syria news. So I'll pull up the map here. You won't be able to see it, but our audience will be able to. Now, just a small little report out of Syria. Hezbollah announced a reduction in its forces in Syria due to the lack of combat needs. Now, currently, Syria and the U.S. are in a stalemate as the U.S. and Kurds occupy the eastern half of the country, and Assad occupies the western half. Now, of course, Idlib is the hottest fighting zone. However, Russia is waging a heavy bombing campaign against, of course, the militants in Idlib. So right now there isn't really a need for Hezbollah in Syria. However, they're simply being moved to the Lebanese-Israeli border, where they are still a defense against the Israeli aggression, where they're still ready to combat Israel. Now, I speculated a few weeks back that maybe Hezbollah is pulling out because they sense a particular Israeli threat. Maybe they expect another repeat of 2006. Well, and that was granted true to a certain extent. Now we sort of all came to the conclusion that if Israel's going to take any action, it's going to be against the specifically Gaza or more targets in Syria. That they're not really up for another, especially ground war in Lebanon. Now, point being is, I think the explanation given by Hezbollah's leadership makes the most sense. Is they're simply not needed there anymore. The war is almost over. They can come home. They've done their job. Which, if anything, is a bigger PR victory. When you're pulling units out because you don't need them, it speaks volumes, especially for a non-state actor like Hezbollah. Look, again, no matter what you think of, whether you think they're the great heroes against Israeli Zionist aggression, whether you think they're the horrible Iranian-backed super terrorists, point being is a non-state actor played that much of a role in the war and can now return home after just a few years.
Absolutely, they have an enormous symbolic power, don't they? Uh, and we shouldn't forget that Israel didn't fight the Lebanese army in 2006. They fought Hezbollah, so their reputation grows. I would even say that some of this might even be tongue in cheek. That Hezbollah might not be being completely accurate about how many they're removing. Right? Uh, do you know what I mean? Because the symbolic victory over stating that they're removing their troops is in some ways even more important than actually being on the battlefield at times. That said, I do think that there is a snag in Idlib. Like I don't think there's going to be that much more progress. I could be wrong, but that much more progress in the coming months. So that could be a coordination with Russia and with Syria,
Yeah, and
and of course with
seeing
Iran.
how things go with Turkey, which we'll discuss later, that could signal to something things happening in Idlib. But a lot of what the, of course, establishment media, what the neoconservatives, neoliberals will try to paint this recent move is, oh, those sanctions on Iran are working. They're strangling out Hezbollah. Hezbollah's losing funds. They can't afford to fight in Syria anymore. But looking at the circumstances of their exit, it doesn't look like that, even if that is the case.
Yeah, yeah. I would presume that in about 2 or 3 months, the Western powers in Israel will still say that there's too many Hezbollahs in Syria, whether there is or isn't.
Yeah, now moving on from one Middle Eastern battlefield to another, some brief news out of Yemen, more the same, but we'll cover it regardless. And just a little bit of an interesting development, so we'll get the map up here. Um, yeah, as you can see on the map, they've been actually making quite some pushes, like by hitting targets in southern Saudi Arabia. But uh, the Houthis and Saudis met behind closed doors for a possible ceasefire. However, the deal failed as the Houthis demanded that the U.S. blockade against food and medicine to the Yemeni people be lifted, and it was rejected by the Saudis. So of course the war is going on. Now we've seen this happen many times before. We've seen, oh, there's a ceasefire in Yemen. Oh, the ceasefire is being violated. When we used to do the Yemen reports every week when things were really picking up, it was ceasefires being violated on the daily. So this recent breakthrough is no surprise, but seeing as we have open news of even just a backdoor negotiations shows that somebody, whether it be Trump, whether it be somebody around Trump, whether it be even the Saudis, are getting weary of the war in Yemen, and they're not even the ones being blockaded and starved. I mean, you have the Houthis who backed down on the ceasefire, who are the ones being blockaded and starved and deprived of medicine and necessities, not the side doing it. What you would think, if anyone's going to get worn down, it's the people under siege. But no, it's the people doing the sieging that are being worn down in this war.
Yeah, I mean, the Houthis were even showcasing this week their missile technology. They're taking Iranian missiles that were formerly based on Russian missiles, and they're tweaking them their own way. Uh, putting the engine on the top, reconstructing the wings. This is to me phenomenal. That this almost basically non-state actor is capable to this extent. That they are this resourceful. That's an enormous amount of confidence. And I think, the attacks that have been going on for 2 years now, well inside Saudi Arabian territory, as well as tankers, because I think they're most likely behind it. It's an enormous flex.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. I mean, again, if you would have told me in 2015 this were the case, I would have laughed at you. You have these people who make shoes out of garbage they find in the ocean, out of these plastic bottles. I mean, you've seen the pictures of the
Yeah.
coming out of Yemen, and these are the people who are you could say are winning the war, and it's laughable, and it goes back to the point of I've been hammering on about this for the past few months or so. Fourth generation warfare. Look, people for some reason are still stuck in the mindset of you're going to get these two conventional forces fighting each other. Even going back to the first Gulf War with the United States fighting Saddam's forces, where one's going to come in, one's going to have all the technical superiority, one is going to have the training superiority. They're going to fight a conventional battle, clean, done, over with. But I mean, this goes back. I mean, hell, even as far as the '70s with Afghanistan, but even more evidently in Syria and Yemen, where you have these unconventional, these forces who are by all means the underdogs, who score victory after victory after victory with tangential support from the Russians and the Iranians.
Yeah, it's enormous, isn't it? They've really, in an ironic way, all those, the first war, the second war in Iraq, Afghanistan, have really informed them about how to fight a fourth generational war. It seems like they've been a sponge the whole time. They've totally figured it out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like
Because they because they've, I mean, I remember, people, getting into YouTube arguments with Saudis saying, in 6 months we're going to be in the capital, and well, that was 2016. Obviously it's not going to happen.
yeah. I think they missed the mark by quite a bit on that one, but yeah, when you put these people under constant siege, look, if you think these people are a threat, and I view them as no more as a bunch of radicals in their caves with some old U.S. and Soviet weapons, that's the credit I give them. The reason they're so skillful at fighting
Yeah,
now is because we've been waging a so-called preventative war, which has only emboldened them not only tenfold, I'd say 20, even 30-fold at this point.
excellent point. Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
They don't
moving.
even. I mean, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Unless you have one last point, I'm gonna move on from that into a bit of
No, no,
news in
no.
this hemisphere. So
Yep.
I'll read this off here. So Chinese troops have been spotted in Venezuela providing assistance and training to the government special forces. Now, people would think, Chinese encroachment into the Western Hemisphere. Which I can agree is a problem, especially in this will hit close to home for you, Vancouver. Their economic influence in the West is ridiculous, and that's honestly where a lot of the anti-Chinese sentiment on the dissident right comes from. It's not any like grand chessboard, grand geopolitical battle against them. It's the fact that they wield so much damn internal influence over our country, and we refuse to do anything about it. But that's beside the point. Now, you look at the story on the surface, it's like, okay, what's China doing in Venezuela? But then, do you remember what we did last week?
I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I know what you're referencing.
Massive arms deal to Taiwan.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know how you could view this as anything else but response to that. Now, how we should go about this, I don't know. I mean, the deal is done with Taiwan. I think we should just leave it alone. I think we should just ignore it. Don't address it. I know as ridiculous as it sounds in terms like the war of words. If we don't address it, and it's like, oh, Chinese efforts have been in vain. The United States didn't even acknowledge our encroachment into Latin America. We're not fearsome. I mean, that's the way some of the East Asian cultures work. But point being is, uh, ill-advised dumb moves like arms sales to Taiwan. Like I said, leverage it all you want. And as I was saying about the trade war, leverage it all you want. Say, oh, we'll have to make an arms deal with Taiwan if China doesn't cooperate. But when you actually go through with it, you throw away the bargaining chip and you garner a response like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely excellent point. Um, you can't like. I know. I know the why you would want to win and win indefinitely. Like we're gonna scrap that deal and we're gonna make an even better deal. It doesn't work that way. Um, yeah. So and really, I mean, what's the size of this force there? It's
I
probably minuscule,
believe like a
right?
hundred
Um,
troops.
they're literally they're it's nothing, right? It's just a troll. It's just a flex.
Yeah, it's like the 200 we have in Ukraine, the assist force there. It's ultimately meaningless. It's there just for symbolic purposes. And look, I'm not a fan of foreign influence in this hemisphere. I think American foreign policy should be reoriented and driving out foreign influence in this hemisphere. Therefore, means yeah, we'd have to have a complete withdrawal from Europe, and I would say most, if not all, withdrawal from Asia. Point being, but I mean, I'm not concerned about 100 Venezuelan troops in China when we have tens of thousands in Korea or Japan. Look, even just sort of taking like a pragmatic standpoint, ignoring who's in the wrong, who's in the right, should China be there, should we drive them out, whatever, ignore all that. If those few dozen Chinese troops do anything, we have tens of thousands in their backyard. It'd be a dumb move for them to make when we're right there.
Right. And I also think that this move by China, in a way, well, not in a way, absolutely reveals their knowledge of a certain narrative underneath, that the narrative has been there for, I would say, minimum the last 5, 6 years, that America cannot project the kind of power it once could. And so there's very little effort that, say, China or Russia have to do in order to keep driving that narrative, right? So 100 troops, Chinese troops in Venezuela is a concern. The reason for that is if you contextualize it. It's still, even after you contextualize it, it's not that much, but it does drive the narrative that like a careful, albeit expansion of China into various zones that they've never been to before, and so on. So yeah, very very little effort with maximum results.
Yeah, and it's like we have only ourselves to blame. We stretch ourselves so damn thin in the Middle East and Europe and Asia. And we can't look if as I said, this is minuscule. This is something that doesn't concern me because at the end of the day, that's exactly the Chinese want you to be concerned about this. So, like I said, the best move for America to take is just ignore it, kind of blow it off. Trump gets active on it, and you can be like, oh, whatever. But point being
Yeah,
is,
yeah. I mean, and
eh, go
there's
ahead.
no the coup didn't happen. That's wasn't Maduro supposed to be like let out? Like, wasn't that all supposed to be accomplished by no later than March? And it didn't happen,
Yeah, that was their
right?
plan, and like
So
I said, because we
that's what I mean about how.
and it honestly just it goes back to this.
Oh, go ahead.
It goes back to this like pussyfoot foreign policy, like I said. Like had something like this happened in the '80s, had there been Russian Chinese troops in a Latin American country, we would have had a rebel group, we would have had a crooked general or military officer funded, and they would have taken power and overthrown the previous regime by then. Look. You can debate the effectiveness or the morality or the whatever or the long term cost and benefit of actually doing a regime change in Venezuela, but if you're gonna do it. Don't go for this bullshit color revolution thing. Don't go with this Maduro and his gay advisors. I mean, I think that was one of the selling points that he
Yeah,
had like a bisexual advisor or something. But point being is, him and his LGBTQ advisors aren't going to overthrow who Maduro, who love him or hate him, is a strongman. He rules Venezuela by force. If you want to get rid of that, you need somebody else who's going to rule Venezuela by force, but play ball with you. And I'm not necessarily opposed to doing that. Not necessarily in favor of it either. It's
yeah,
like again,
yeah,
all circumstantial. But if you're gonna do it, do it.
yeah. And that's right. Absolutely. I don't think they've realized like an era has passed.
They tried to export this model that they
You
use
know.
in Europe, specifically Eastern Europe, and apply it to Latin America. And then it's a surprise. It's a Russian aggression when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, why didn't this policy from Georgia and Ukraine and
Completely
Poland
agree.
work in Venezuela or Bolivia? It's like it's as if all people groups are not the same. It's as if there's differences between people when you go to different parts of the world. Yeah, it's a mystery. It's a mystery.
Right.
Now, moving on from
Not to mention they have different histories.
oh, you wouldn't say that. I mean, all I know is that one of them are white, so they must be the bad guys here. But with my cheap jokes out of the side, I've been making a lot of those tonight.
Yeah.
Not necessarily proud of myself. Just a little follow up on the Epstein thing and its ties to certain foreign countries, and I'll allow you to take a guess. But in the bail hearing for, of course, Epstein, it was revealed that law enforcement agents had discovered fake Saudi passports and an image of Mohammed bin Salman at the Epstein mansion in a safe, locked away with diamonds and cash. Now, the prosecution argued that the cash and passports proved he was a flight risk and thus should be imprisoned until trial. Now, I wonder where these passports could have came from. That's anyone's guess. Now, we do have to wonder: was Mohammed bin Salman himself one of the people involved in the little Epstein Island? Did he pay a few visits there himself? Is he one of the individuals being blackmailed? Is that why he's so cooperative with the West, especially compared to other Saudi officials? And not only him, how many people from the Gulf, from these states? I mean, you hear about it all the time. They get caught in Vegas with male escorts. Now it's usually lower to mid-level ones who can have it covered up. But how many higher-ranking Saudi people do you think are, if not Epstein Island, going to places where they can do these kind of depraved things? They're famous for their deviancy. Who says that they're not doing it here? And I'd really like to see those flight records because look, a lot of people hear about this. It's like, oh, rich guy doing perverted things. What a surprise! Rich guy doing perverted illegal things. What a surprise! Oh, all these ties in with foreign intelligence agencies in foreign countries and oil sheiks and Mossad agents. Then it's a genuine surprise.
Right. It was a honeypot. You know, uh, using the Lolita Express. I, you know, I think I have to say I didn't expect that Epstein would have had a fake name and a fake passport posing as a Saudi. I mean, he's not European, but he's not Saudi either. Like, how is this even believable?
Yeah, he's of certain
Uh,
extraction. Kind of looks European, kind of looks Middle Eastern. It just depends. I think I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions on that one. But point being, it's like, yeah, if you're gonna have a fake passport, I think there's, I mean, hell, like I'm not even gonna go this far, but he probably could have just barely pulled off, a Lebanese one, if anything. There's plenty of countries he could have had a fake
yeah.
passport to, or he could use his, real passport to a country he has a certain right to return to. If you picking up what I'm putting down out there in the audience, but moving on from that, like, yeah, I'm curious. This is gonna go a lot deeper than we think. This is gonna be like the Panama Papers on steroids.
Yeah, I agree. Also, like, why him for Saudi Arabia when he wouldn't be your first candidate? Not really, you know, not convincing. So for me, the act itself is an act of desperation. There's there's other people that could have had fake ID that are strong partners with the West, however, are not Arabs or technically not Arabs. Um, that could have passed as a Saudi, but him, you know,
Now,
it's
I'm
very
I'm
strange.
curious. Do you think how many ways do you think they're going to try to tie this to Iran and or Russia? How much are going to this aid to Putin when visited Epstein Island, or this Iranian advisor visited Epstein Island? This guy who's like one step away from the Ayatollah. You think you're going to start seeing those soon? I have a feeling they're going to try to create those connections in order to justify further action. Maybe I'm reaching a bit here, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it could be, and then Putin decided the last second not to,
Yeah, so
according to sources. I think they'll try to tie it in somehow. Um, I mean, I don't know. It's you know, would Putin be involved in something like that? I can honestly say I don't know. I doubt it, but anything's possible.
well, I'm not even saying Putin himself, but like some Russian oligarch
But
or
it doesn't mean
somebody
like the
connected to the
U.S.
run.
Won't.
Yeah, like I
Right,
don't think they're gonna
right.
outright accuse Putin. They're gonna accuse somebody close
Oh,
to
some of
him.
them are pretty sleazy.
Yeah, yeah. They have a lot in common with
Right,
Epstein. Again, if you're
right.
picking up what I'm putting down.
Putin's favorite oligarch. Putin's favorite oligarch.
Yeah. The one that changes every week. Yeah, it seems like he's a different favorite oligarch every week, depending on what's convenient for the media narratives.
Yeah.
But you got to love, again, not to praise Putin too much, but he said, wasn't it like 2014, 2015, saying that the modern Western world was under the influence of satanic pedophiles. He said something along those lines.
He did. He did. He honestly did. That's right. Absolutely woke.
Yeah, it's like
I can guess what YouTube channels he was watching.
oh boy, oh boy, I can only imagine. What do you think his Groiper alt is?
I'd love it if Putin actually had a fake Twitter account with the Groiper Putin Groiper. That would be awesome.
Oh boy. Now, let's move on to the last couple stories we have here. We'll get into the Turkey one, which you've
Mhm.
seemed to have enjoyed very much. Just it has been chaotic. So, of course, the first S-400s have arrived in Turkey, and the reaction from Washington and Brussels has not been too positive. Now, going on, just starting with the EU reaction, they've suspended high-level talks with Turkey to review EIB lending. They've also suspended aviation agreement talks, and they've adopted punitive measures against the drilling off of Cyprus's shores. So, and there's that, and then you have the U.S. threatening to pull out the F-35 and saying, "Oh, we have this, we have that," and so it's funny because as we were saying off there, we finally have a collective negative attitude towards the Turks and the Turkish government within the West once more, something we haven't had in centuries, and we're gonna waste it turning Constantinople into a gay version of Las Vegas. That's what's gonna happen.
Hagia Sophia as the greatest gay bar ever. Yeah, this is, I think, one of the most pivotal moments in the history of NATO. I don't think it can be understated. And some reasons why. Well, the S400 is pretty sophisticated. India, of course, is going to purchase it. One of the reasons it's sought after is because it can read, dozens and dozens of aircrafts close by almost immediately after it's gone into the air. Now, and this is why the F-35 will never go to Turkey, is the S-400 is aware, not completely. It's the algorithms and the way the radar works in the F-35, but essentially the F-35 has a very broad signal that makes it difficult to locate. Acquiring the S-400 literally allows the S-400 to be tweaked for discovering the F-35, and this is why Turkey purchasing it ostensibly means that they don't want the F-35, and that's huge, both from like from a military corporate aspect to a geopolitical aspect. This the system, of course, because of can be tweaked for other American planes without having to uh, interact with America, because of course Turkey itself has all kinds of F-16s and other jets that are still in service. So this is, I think, this is going to be a much bigger row than is appearing right now. The other thing is it's sending a signal to other NATO members that if you don't really like the way where NATO is going, you might have some room to pivot, depending on your circumstances. You can make a deal with Russia. Maybe you can play both sides. So I think that's another thing that is obviously is being said by this deal.
Yeah, and as we were discussing both off air and a little bit earlier, yeah, you're seeing the same thing happen in southern, eastern, and central Europe, where they're sort of doing this ping ponging thing that Turkey can do, where they can go to Moscow, they can go to Washington, they can go to Brussels, and no matter how bad of terms they are with them, they'll hear them out. Now, Turkey, just because of its geographical position, just because of circumstances that it has, I would say, over these European countries, even collectively, they can do that more often than, for example, say what Poland or Italy or Hungary could do. But the point stands.
Right, right. And none of this would be possible without Russia not being a threat. That's how it works. If Russia was really the kind of threat that the Western media is saying, there is no way these kind of bargains could be achieved. There's
Yeah,
no way they would have these meetings and these negotiations. There's no way Orban. I remember how often we predicted Orban, like Orban's going to go to Moscow in 2 or 3 days. You can bet on that. Um, so it destroys the narrative that Russia is a threat, and it of course garners power to Russia geopolitically speaking, and it also for said countries it gives them a certain amount of autonomy and being able for them to pursue their own self-interest.
yeah, just playing on your point, if it were 1982, this would not be happening because they would have, for right or wrong, viewed Russia as a legitimate threat.
Absolutely
The
not.
Russians would have actually had the ability to exert a threat towards Western Europe. But seeing as it is 2019 now, that's not happening for obvious reasons. But it is
Right.
interesting the fact that um, you could say that I would say Hungary really showed the path forward in terms of you don't need to be beholden to the European Union or NATO. And you could see after Russia and Turkey had their little spats over Syria, Turkey somewhat proved that. And you see the populist right in Europe with people like Conte and Salvini in Italy, with the some of these other populist Eastern European countries, and arguably with the populists in France who don't hold power, but seeing as the way things go, may change soon. Or even with an established figure like Merkel in Germany, you're seeing that this is the way forward. You're not beholden to Brussels or Washington or this coalition of European states. There's more options out there, but moving on from European states,
Right.
I probably the most ridiculous story this week. If the Turkey one wasn't the funniest, just in terms of the reactions over reactions, but let's get right into it. So, a Ukrainian militant, Vitaly Markiv, attacked a TV station, I believe, back in 2000. I believe it was 2016. Was fighting there, but point being is
14.
2014. Whoa,
Oh.
way back in the beginning of the war. Now he attacked this TV station with a rifle grenade,
Hmm.
and it killed several people, including an Italian journalist. Now, Markiv, who also allegedly had apparently had Italian citizenship, went back to Italy. He was not extradited, and was tried and imprisoned for killing an Italian citizen. Makes sense. Now, a right
Right.
sector parliament candidate by the name of Dmitry Yarosh says Italians who come to Ukraine should be tried for going to fight alongside the Donbass. He said, "Oh, we should, get him on some trumped-up charges and imprisoned as reprisal for this." Now, following this, the parliamentary candidate recently said this about the event in 2014. Now, following this, the Italian police foiled a plot by an Italian neo-Nazi group to stage a terrorist attack against Matteo Salvini. Now, Salvini said, quote, "I received some death threats from a member of the Ukrainian far right, so I signaled them to the police and found a missile and other weapons during yesterday's operations." Now, in the raid, the police seized an air-to-air missile, which had no explosives, but a, quote, resettable charge, 9 assault rifles, a submachine gun, 7 guns, 3 shotguns, 20 bayonets. Apparently, there's another Gaddafi out there we got to worry about, and nearly 1,000 cartridges of ammo and other weapons parts. Now, it gets better than this because okay, you have these Italian neo Nazis. They want to take out Salvini because apparently he took out their buddies and is friends with Vladov Putler or whatever. So the mainstream media, CNN in particular, tried to paint these men who had fought in the Donbass previously as if they were fighting for the Donbass separatists, as if they were fighting for the DPR and not against them. Now, they weren't part of Azov, but they were part of an organization like Azov that was going to fight the evil Russians in eastern Ukraine. But so they put that out there And then almost immediately
Right.
afterwards, they had to like scrub it. That say, oh, they were actually went to go fight against the Russians in Ukraine, which I mean, we all know why they did, and of course they're going to be like, "Oh,
Well, as
it's
we were
it's
saying,
it's too complex for you plebeians," and of course they're going to remember what they hear first, which is, "Oh, they
yeah,
went to go fight neo Nazis go to fight with Russians after trying to kill a government Italian official." But it goes back to as you were telling me off air. It's like, yeah, if they make it too complex for us plebeians, we won't worry about it and we'll go with the first narrative that we hear.
exactly. Yeah, it's absolutely intentional. They're well aware of how this went down. I mean, these are reporters that are that were killed. Um, I think, I mean, besides the Italian and two Russians, I think there might have been the survivor was a French reporter, but there might have been another French reporter who died as well. However, the one that survived has the footage of them being killed, even after they were already lying down on the ground. With, I think at that point they may or may not have already been wounded. And this guy Markiv, his battalion, which belongs to the First Volunteers. These are like, foreign volunteers of Ukrainian extraction. Just killed them, just like dropped them, and they're just reporters. Um, because of course I mean, this really typifies a kind of, a certain segment of the Ukrainian population has literally gone completely paranoid. Like, um, they really, Ukrainian media was saying that Putin rigged the court, Putin got to the judge, like as if it's completely normal for you to kill journalists with a grenade launching AK-47. Like, it, it's absurd. It's absurd, and the only reason, of course, they think it is okay is because there's plenty of Western countries that probably would have ignored it or not found. Like if he had fled for whatever reason, I think to Germany or I don't know, maybe Norway. I'm just
Yeah,
guessing here.
or
I
if he
don't,
killed that French journalist instead, they would have been
he.
like, "Oh, it was an accident. Oh, you didn't do anything wrong."
It's possible. It's possible, right? Uh, but yeah, he got caught, and he deserves what he gets.
Yeah, and it's just you following up on what we were talking about last week with the meeting between Putin and several Italian government officials, including Conte and Salvini. You had Conte, the prime minister, pretty much saying, "Oh, Russia, don't be too modest. You play more of a role in Ukraine than you think." As sort of like, "Oh yeah, we're definitely on Ukraine's side. We're definitely on Russian side." And now you have all of a sudden the Ukrainian parliamentary candidates and Ukrainian militants threatening Italian citizens in a time where they were just too worried about how Russia was getting too close with Italy. I'm sure this will win the hearts and minds of Europe as they proceed towards integration in the EU and NATO. I think this will work out. I think this will be great. I know he wasn't directly involved in this, but I think this will reflect on great on Zelensky's administration. I think it will be reflect great on the entire Ukrainian nation. There's no way that they can't get into the
Yeah,
European Union now by unhingedly threatening citizens of one of the major member states.
yeah, it's crazy. Um, I mean, the narrative is falling apart. Um, it's a lost cause, and I think in many ways, like I honestly think that you know the the so-called Italian fascists that were caught with this, Ukrainian sympathizers and so on. Uh, it could have been statecraft, but I tend to believe that the players were more or less sincere, or the vast majority of them were sincere, because I think a lot of you know Ukrainians that are ardent patriots, let's say, like Yarosh and some of these other groups like Pravi Sector. I think they have absolute crazy people in their organization, like that really think that they're going to solve something. Now, whether a state actor can take advantage of that, of course they can, and it happens all the time, is another thing. But I think they sense a kind of desperation that they're not going to get Crimea back,
Now, just
and
to give our audience an example,
as we
just on the screen here, you won't be able to see. But
Go
this
ahead.
this is the missile they seized in their raid. Now, keep in mind they didn't seize this from Ukrainians in Italy. They seized this from Italian so-called neo-Nazis who were trying to aid the Ukrainians. So it gets even more contrived than this. And just for those on the screen, just that isn't like a missile that you would like a surface-to-air missile or surface-to-surface. That is an air-to-air missile, something you would mount on an aircraft for aerial combat with other aircraft. Now, I don't know how the fuck they got this. People are
Yeah.
saying they got it from Qatar. People are saying whatever. But I don't know. Like, look at the size of the missile compared to the people. Like, you need a crew to mount that on a plane. That's not just something one person lift up. They have like
Yeah.
mounted on something right now.
That's how do you disguise that? Like, what?
Oh,
I guess you
that's
put
this
it in a
this
big pipe.
this
Like,
this is my new lamp.
I don't know. Yeah, yeah. So it's incredible that they got that through somehow.
But it's such
But
a
there's always somebody that will be. Go
it's a ridiculous picture. And like,
ahead.
just it looks like something out of a 2000s comedy skit. It looks
See,
like
yeah,
something out of just like this is something like SNL would have done like weren't when they weren't good but also weren't terrible. That's what this looks like to me.
yeah. Oh yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Yeah, I was amazed when I saw this photo. The first thing I thought was like, how did they get that? How do you just get that? Of course, all you need is like one crazy person to fall for it, a few others to be convinced, and then certain people in the state that would be happy to oblige you with it. So you get caught.
I'm just saying Iran's really
But it
getting
just
out of
shows
hand
you
with all
the
these
level
missile
of
exports.
desperation.
First it was Hezbollah and the Houthis, but now Italian neo Nazis. Why did the Iranians supply these Italian neo Nazis? I'm surprised they didn't go with that narrative, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's all I have to say for this show, I guess you could say. This is quite the trip. I don't know exactly how to put it. Just a very odd episode.
Yeah, but I think also just like nothing like on the surface spectacular happened, but all kinds of spectacular things are actually taking place underneath the surface. Very big monumental changes.
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth. At first, I didn't connect the dots
So
between that guy getting arrested and these weapons caches getting seized until I actually read it. I saw the giant missile, that they seized a giant missile. And I was like, oh, what? But then I actually looked at it and I was like, oh wow, this connected to that thing I was just making fun of the other day. But with that out of the way, unless you have
like
any
how are they going to launch that?
yeah, it's like
It's so insane. No, I don't have anything. How can you add anything?
maybe like maybe an S-400, target practice.
Oh, boom.
I don't know where I was going with that joke, but just turkey. Yes, it's. I did not expect this going into this week, especially considering the fact on the surface you weren't really paying attention. There's some weeks where you just hear about it just because it's so prominent. But if you don't, I mean, it's been like this for about the past month. You actually have to go digging, but the stories you go digging for that you find are absolutely insane. But that's all I have to say for this week, and beyond that, unless you have
Yeah.
anything else to say, I'm gonna bring it to a close.
No,
Well,
no, I got nothing.
thank you everyone for tuning in.
But it's been a
Perseus
great
will be
show.
back with us next week. Unfortunately,
Thanks, guys.
as I said, he was off doing. I won't disclose his personal information, but we'll just say it was important. It was trust me. We will not lie to you. It's not like when we send GSP to Moscow. We're open about that. Okay. Um, yeah. So
Right.
we'll see you guys
You'll
next
never
time.
dox me.
See you guys next time, and goodbye.